Hey everyone, we've had a very succinct question. I'll read it out. Hi Claire, can you please do a podcast on listening to others while our own dialogue is happening? Even though I'm aware of it, it's so easy to get caught up in it. Thanks so much. Yes. Well, it's just what happens, isn't it? And while it's happening, in that moment, there's no other choice. And and while it's happening, we are, yeah, we're 100% really missing out on that other person, aren't we? And I speak from personal experience of this. Yeah, they're talking and we're sitting there resistant or resentful or annoyed or scared or thinking they should be talking about different things or they should be talking in a different way, or um, they're boring or needy or self-centered, or they're not listening to us, or um, our mind is going into the future of this relationship, and where will it go if all the dialogues like this, and so we're just in that moment only in a relationship with ourself, aren't we? A relationship with a mirror, with our own, with the mind is obsessed with itself in that moment. Yeah. And that's just what happens, isn't it? It's just something is going on in that moment. There's a trigger, or there's an insecurity, or there's um a particular word, or a phrase, or a way of speaking, or a topic that suddenly sends us into this loop of um, self dialogue, really. And there's no way around it. In that moment, we are not listening to that person. We're not present. Um, we don't see them. We don't hear them. We're just in our own loop of self. And fair enough, really fair enough. That's just how the mind works. Um, it's just what happens. And I think increasingly through this conversation, that space of being with someone but not with them, being in the world but not really. We're in a meeting, or we're out for dinner, or we're chatting with friends, or someone's telling us about their day, and the appearance of us is there, but actually mentally we're completely checked out and involved in the mind's own stuff. Increasingly, the suffering involved in that stops being attributed to what that person is saying, and starts to be more obviously because in that moment we feel separate to them. And I think that's the really intriguing aspect of this conversation, is that suffering taken at surface level is always attributed to the apparent reality that's going on. So I'm feeling awful in this moment because of you, because you're talking about these things, because you're boring me, or you're upsetting me, and so I'm suffering because of you. And that suffering is just more evidence for the mind to stay in that loop, to continue that space of resistance, and inner noise, inner chatter that completely shuts out the other person. But it looks like we're suffering because of them, and so it's all evidence that what my mind is saying right now is true and right. But the more we hang out in this conversation, the more clear it becomes that in that moment we're suffering because there's a veil over the wholeness of what we are and the unconditional love of what we are, and the presence, the spaciousness, the attention that we really are. And that veil is the story. The veil is what the mind is saying in that moment. And that's why we're suffering. So it makes no sense to take that veil more seriously in order to get rid of the suffering. No, the suffering will be got rid of by seeing the veil over the purity, in a way, of our own existence, the real presence that we are. Yeah. So, and also in terms of what we can do, I think again and again it comes back to almost like a rewiring of that signal of suffering, so that it no longer takes us deeper and deeper into story of self, but instead it becomes a signal that the mind is lost in itself. The mind is going round all these rabbit warrens trying to suffer less, but the rabbit warrens that it keeps creating are the reason for the suffering. And so it keeps coming back to that over and over and over again. The stress, the resistance, the resentment is a signal. Yeah, just get present to what this mind is doing. Get present, really. Also acknowledge for ourselves what the fear is in that moment, maybe, or the shame, or the emotion that's been triggered, jealousy maybe, or who knows, comparisons and future projections. We can acknowledge where the mind's going, and in the acknowledging of it, it's sort of owned and honored without being put on the shoulders of that other person. They don't have to stop talking. They don't have to disappear for me to be okay. And it's just that over and over and over again. And what is interesting then in that space is in the things that we think we want to say to that other person when we're in the midst of the story, the midst of separation and suffering. We think we want them to be quiet or to not talk about those subjects, or stop triggering us, or these things are almost impossible to talk about in the midst of the story, because we're not really talking to them. We're talking to the mirror of all of this. We're talking out of separation. So the words are coming from separation and they're pushing the person even further away. But when the suffering is a sign, or mind's just going a little bit lost right now, and we come back to real presence, real stillness with that person. And then in that space, we really can easily say, this subject's uncomfortable for me, or, don't interrupt me anymore, or, let's talk about something else, or, I need a bit of air, or, whatever. But it's not coming from a pushing away. It's coming from the absence of any separation, just like they are us. And the presence brings us back into that space. And And that's unconditional love, and anything can be said in that space. It's our authentic truth in that space, and it's our authentic truth voiced from our truth to their truth, really. Yeah. So it's a good question. Thank you. Lots of love. Bye.